Welcome to What Grows. It's a podcast where we play with the connection between who we are and how we grow. I'm your host, Noella Mashi. So, Susan, you've been my coach and advisor for many years now,
Mhm.
and you've grounded me when I made major career decisions several times. You've got gentle humor and compassion that just gives me a helpful sense of perspective. And you
Mm.
also know the right questions to ask at the right moment. So, the kind of emotional intelligence that you bring to your work doesn't happen by accident. You've been shaped by your journey, which you capture so
Mhm.
beautifully in your book, My Five Stones. From witnessing snake handlers in your Southern Baptist childhood to working at Apple in its early days, from earning your doctorate in ministry to serving as a chaplain at a federal women's prison, you've lived several lifetimes in one. And now you're in Italy with your husband and you continue sharing your wisdom with clients around the world. I'm really glad that we can speak today. Welcome.
Me, me too. It's lovely to be here with you and to see your face again. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah. So tell me about My Five Stones. What made you decide to write it?
Mm. It was a counter kind of to my dissertation. I had, if anybody, you or anybody else out there, gone through the dissertation process, you start with an idea that you're going to write what you want, and you end up writing what your what your thesis committee says you're going to write. So, I really had wanted to write a book about the women at the prison, and but I realized I wanted to write my dissertation on that. I wrote a very technical dissertation about using the thematic apperception test with women, and it wasn't really what I wanted to say. So that was really the impetus. The woman I called Buddhist bank robber said to me, "Don't forget us. We are the forgotten of the forgotten." And so I was very moved by that and wanted to affirm their existence and how they were treated and very differently than men. So it was important to me but I had to tell the background too as to how did this, you know, older white woman end up in this position at prison when there was really nothing in my life that would have led me to be there.
Yeah. I mean, and the journey, at least from when I read your book and just so
Mm.
moving. But to me it started with Marissa. Um
Yes.
There's so Marissa is a young girl that she was in her teens, 15, 16, that you met at a
Hmm. Hmm.
children's cancer hospital. And you spent a lot of time together and just grew to love each
Hmm.
other. And something from your book you wrote, from that moment on, I believed that being with Marissa now was enough. I didn't need to try to manage our future. Whatever was in store, I felt I had the faith and courage to cope with it. I would fight my own tendency to escape into the safe land of denial and try my best to be in the present moment. During the time I was with Marissa, I felt my life was in a universal flow of energy. I saved that because yeah, there's so much there. Can you tell us about Marissa?
Marissa was lovely. So I was, I was at kind of ends and ons in my career, not really knowing. I had been at an IBM Apple startup, and the CEO had a massive heart attack and died. And so I was just kind of like, what do I do next? I didn't really want to go back into high tech. And so I read an article by this woman actually, she lived in Berkeley, and she started an organization called Jacob's Heart to work with families of children who had cancer. And so I thought, okay, I can go meet her, Lori Butterworth, phenomenal woman, and just raise money. I had a phobia about hospitals. I absolutely did not want to go to see sick, dying children. This would be my nightmare. So I contacted Lori and I said, I'd really like to help raise funds, do something. admire the work you're doing. She said, oh, great, Susan, come in, we'll go to lunch at Stanford and then, talk and blah, blah, blah. She had this energy that just swept me up. So I said, okay, great. So I'm in her car, captive. And she said, oh, by the way, I just have to drop a few things off at the Stanford Children's Hospital. I went, okay, I'll just wait in the car. She said, no, I think it's better if you come in. It's a little hot out here. So just come in. You don't have to do anything. Just come in with me. I walk in and I see these 3 and 4-year-olds with chemical drips walking with poles going through the lobby. And I think, I can't do this. I can't be here. I was just stricken. So, but Lori was unstoppable. Okay, well, now let's go upstairs, And so I'm just dragged along and thinking, oh my God, where are we now? She said, we're on the cancer ward for older kids. I said, okay. So I'm walking, looking for an escape route, really. And Marissa saw me start to walk by and she hollered out at me. She said, hey, you. She was a Mexican American kid. She's a really phenomenal child. And I said, yeah, what? She goes, come in here. So I said, okay. So I walked in and she said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm with Lori, just delivering toys and things. Okay. She said, where do you live? I said, I live in Palo Alto. Okay, that's good. Do you have children? I said, no. Okay, that's good. Um, do you have free time? I said, yeah. Okay, that's good. Then you can take over as my mom. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, my mom is not available. She's in prison. And you're the best thing that's come by. You're going to have to do this. I said, okay. And, it was just, she had a marvelous sense of humor and smile and just was phenomenal. She was just a phenomenal human being.
Yeah. And there's something about watching a loved one and being in the moment, like you said, um,
Hmm.
not escaping into the safe land of denial that this is all going to have a happy ending and there's always a cure,
Hmm.
etc. What would you say to someone who's watching a loved one suffer, and feeling paralyzed but wanting to just like learn to be with them and be present? What's the difference, I guess, between giving up and letting go?
That's a good question. Do you know, I, for me, it was having faith that there was something more than this physical world. So I really believed that then. I believe that now. So that was the first thing. Also, Marissa really directed it. I remember going into, because I would see her every single day. I had a consulting assignment, was really stressful. I walked into her room and she said to me, you're really stressed, aren't you? I said, yes. She said, don't bring that into my room.
Mm.
I said, you're right, Marissa. Let me go out, get myself together. I'll come back. And she really taught me how to be, you know, how to have my focus on her, not my fears, not my sadness, not my grief. What did she want? So it was really a change of focus. Um,
Mm.
and everybody's different. There were 5 or 6 girls about her age, all dying of this dread type of leukemia, all from the same farming community that God knows what kind of chemicals they used, but it's a whole nother story. And they were all very different how they handled it. They were all
Mm.
very different.
You said something about believing that there's something more afterwards. And in my mind, it kind of linked to when you walk in and you leave your stuff at the door because you're being present to Marissa, this like loss of self. I
Hmm.
or maybe just letting go of like the stuff the ego wants to worry about. When I think about what happens after we die, and many people I've spoken to feel like the biggest fear is this loss of identity and this loss of self. And
Hmm.
I guess I kind of yeah, I guess I kind of wonder about practice, what
Hmm.
how to prepare myself. How do we think about this in a way that's not so scary? How do we experience it in a way that just makes us more calm and even potentially look forward to this like transition.
Right, right. And I do think it's a transition. Edgar Casey was a guy from, I think, the 30s. And he was struck by lightning. He's from Kentucky, this kind of farming community, and had no education particularly, but he was struck by lightning. And he started doing all of these medical diagnoses, and he was like the wonder of his times. And doctors, people would go to him, and he would be this great diagnostician and just cured a lot of people. And he said, and I always remembered this, he said, if you could remember the fear that the soul had before it incarnated here on earth, you would never fear death.
Mm.
So that really always struck with me that, coming into earth as a soul has to be super scary. So
Mm.
going out wouldn't be nearly as scary, right? But I think what happens to us is our ego just holds on. It's what its job is. The ego's job is to hold on. And so then the more we hold on, the harder the fight is to let go. I currently think now, when you were talking about the self, I think of it in terms of, in Tuesdays with Maury talked about this, that we're all kind of part of the ocean, and one wave comes in, that's us, and then the wave goes back out and we join the group consciousness. And I think that's how it is, that we're in here, we come in for a certain period of time, and we have our experience, we do the best we can, hopefully, and then we go back to the ocean, to the group consciousness. And and so that doesn't seem very scary. I think that the fear comes from the ego, whose job it is to keep us safe,
Mm. To keep us alive?
keep us alive, and keep us safe in its sense. So you have to really kind of battle with the ego.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to pull that back to kind of friends and colleagues in their 30s, in their mid 30s, just kind of, spent my early 20s really thinking that I could change the world single-handedly.
Mm-hmm,
Got
mm-hmm,
into my 30s, and it's like more of, sometimes I feel like I'm hitting my head against a wall, but I do still feel like there's work to be done and that I need to contribute
mm-hmm,
to doing that work. And I don't know what, I guess I'm wondering, as you've kind of experienced way more, you've experienced more years of work than I have, just like, what is that evolution from I have to change everything to I can't change everything to I am part of something much bigger, but I still have a role to play? What does that look like?
that's so. For me, it is it's a sad thing to say, but sometimes we never see the effect of our work, right?
Mm.
And is it really that you want to see that, or is it our need to control, right? To control the outcome. And so, the work I did with the women in prison, for example, at times it seemed hopeless that they were going to go back into the system and recommit the crimes that they had. And what difference had it made that I even had been there? I had those thoughts at times, but what kept me going was, one doesn't know, right? You don't know. If somebody's on a path and you nudge them just a little at the bottom, then they're going to end up in a whole different place. And that's what I hold on to. It's not mine to control the outcome. It's just my job to be there in a loving fashion with another human being.
Mm. I really feel that, like, if I listen inside of me, who am I called to be? Like, what have I been designed to kind of do?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
follow that to wherever, yeah, that natural conclusion is, and trust that I've done my stretch of the of the
Right.
race.
Right. Right. And is that comforting to you when you think of it that way?
It is. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. It's kind of yeah, what's my business versus what's God's business, you
Right,
know?
exactly, exactly. That's a hard one. I used to tell the women in prison who would come in with, terrible problems. And I would say, you need to hand it over to God and not take it back. I mean, that's our problem. We can easily say, okay, God, I'm giving this problem to you. But then when it doesn't get solved immediately, we take the problem back. And
Mm.
that's where much of our unneeded pain and suffering comes from.
Yes. I mean, something you also spoke about in the book, and I would love to talk about the women's prison
Mm-hmm.
and motherhood as well at a certain point and mothers. Um, but something you talked about was your experience with breast cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of when you talk about not taking the problem back. You talked about the journey. There was some depression around that, there was some
Mm-hmm.
fear around that. And then there was also also some acceptance and some finding joy, interestingly enough, in watching movies.
Yeah,
um,
it's funny. That's true.
so yeah, tell me about, I mean, maybe you did take the problem back, maybe it was a sick, like an iterative process, but tell me about how you
Mm-hmm.
gave that problem to God and then didn't take it back.
That was a challenge. I mean, my whole breast cancer episode was a huge lesson in, okay, putting into action, all of my spiritual beliefs, right? So it's really hard when it's up close and personal like that, um, not to have the fear, not to have the need for control, to trust the doctors, trust the process. It's a struggle I still have with the medical care, and I believe it. I believe that this is the better way, not my way. Um, but it's not easy. I mean, I have to remind myself: is this my work or is this God's work?
Mm,
Because women, particularly women who have been trained to be achievement oriented in the world and go out there, we have an expectation that we can influence almost anything that comes to us. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't.
mm, yeah,
Mm.
that's hard. That's, yeah, something I'm also dealing with the different medical system in the US. It's just um, I protect myself by doing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research, but I think it is really kind of calming my ego and my need for control.
Right,
And
for sure. And,
yeah.
if that works, Noella, that's great, right? Um, Knowing that um, is an important part. I always talk about people developing the user's manual for ourselves while we're here on Earth, right? So, in your user's manual, to know that this is important to me and I have to learn ways and methods to calm it down, and also is what I had to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of ands in the in life, right? It's not one or
That's
the
true.
other. So I want to go back to you mentioned the woman in the prison who said, "Don't forget about us." And
Mhm,
was her
mhm.
name Eileen, or what? Am I getting that
No,
wrong?
her name was Barbara, but I called
Barbara.
her BBR, Buddhist bank robber.
Oh, okay. And which one? I just for clarity, which one was the one that kind of reminded you of your mother in certain behaviors?
She did.
Okay,
Buddhist bank
Barbara.
robber
It was
did.
Barbara.
Right, right.
Okay,
It
okay,
was
great. Okay,
Barbara.
so
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Barbara. Um, so can you first, just going back to kind of you going into prisons and
Hmm.
meeting people who made you ask questions about yourself? Can you tell me about Barbara and what made you feel like there's something you need to learn about yourself in order to be able to support Barbara?
Well, Barbara was very, very smart and very assertive slash aggressive. So she would come in and say, you know, she would walk in with an appointment and then say, "So what are they teaching you out there? What was your course? What did you learn in your course yesterday?" I mean, just in this, and it would just rock me. I wasn't sure. Should I answer her? Should I try to turn this question around to be about her? It was really challenging for me. And it took me some time. Initially I was like, blah, 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 blah. I'm learning about Mark, the book of Mark, and then she'd quiz me and I wouldn't have the answers for her questions, right? So it was a challenge. And that is what reminded me. My mother. My mother used to do things like that. What's the date of the Battle of Hastings? Whatever. She would have these questions lined up, and so when I realized I was tripping into that, and had a great supervisor, he said, you can step back from this and try to figure out what is she really looking for. Make it less about you and more about her, right? And I mean, I eventually got there, but it was hard.
Mm, mm. There's something about people who bring back childhood memories, and mothers are just wow. I, f- I love my mom. She's wonderful. If you're listening to this, mom, I love you. But there's also there's also kind of whenever I encounter someone who is trying to help me in ways that I don't want to be helped, I
Yeah.
get really afraid and defensive and angry, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something that's unresolved that I need to work on, to do with my childhood.
Right.
And I love how the universe kind of throws people and things at us that remind us of what we
Absolutely.
need to deal with. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and Barbara sounds like she was that for you.
She was that for me, and we walked that path together, boy. I mean, she learned from me, but I also learned a lot from her. I'd never really been around heroin addicts before. I didn't really know. And I'd lived a very kind of sheltered life up until that point. I was the good girl who did these things and had these accomplishments, and boom, then I'm in prison with people who really struggled in ways I had never had to struggle. So Barbara was, and she was very good at describing her feelings and what was going on with her. So she was a tremendous teacher for me, about life's choices. How many choices do you really have? If you're a heroin addict on the street, how many choices do you have, right? So, I mean, it was very thought provoking for me. And we formed a real bond, most unexpectedly from my part. I mean, she came every single week.
Mm, mm.
So I was clearly represented something to her too. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's something when I meet someone who has fewer choices than me, I could go two ways. One, I could be grateful for the choices I have and the choices they have, or I could feel guilty for the choices I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, again, drawing back to childhood, just be grateful that you have food on the table, be great, etc., etc.
Right.
and and how, yeah, so you learned from Barbara. How did you how did you learn? What did you learn? And how did you make it something that was kind of affirming as opposed to something that made you kind of, yeah, a little bit feel more helpless, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I didn't feel helpless. I felt grateful for my life, that I was born into the circumstances I was born in. So that's one thing. Um, I learned a different level of compassion. I think before I had an idea, like these people I would see on the streets, addicts, whatever, I didn't have that much compassion for them. I think, well, why are they, why don't they get into treatment? I had this kind of why don't they mentality, right? And with Barbara, she was so good at telling her story of how it all happened to her. She, like every other woman in prison I met, was sexually abused when she was quite young.
Mm,
And so that sexual abuse for a woman between the ages, most of them between the ages of 5 and 11. At 11, it all stops, which is a whole nother trauma. Breaks their thoughts about fears of male authority, you know. So they don't have, like, I didn't rob a bank because, one, I didn't ever need the money bad enough to rob a bank. But two, I was terrified. Like, I would be terrified to go try to rob a bank, right? But the women in prison weren't afraid because they had already, had these sexual relationships with men that they could manipulate. So it was, yeah, it was showing me a side of life without remorse, without pity, without judgment. Just, this is what happened.
Yeah. I I want to ask you about, yeah, the experience of addiction. And my understanding right now is, or at least my belief is, that we all are drawn to kind of unhealthily use certain things at certain points in
Mm-hmm.
our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We escape
For
in
sure.
different ways. But heroin is a very specific addiction. And you mentioned that,
Mm-hmm.
I think Barbara said, it felt like a warm blanket. It felt like safety. Can you
Right.
tell me about, well, I mean, what patterns you noticed? Like, you mentioned the male authority figure. What is the journey that you saw women go through after that initial kind of abuse in childhood to lead to addiction?
So, one addition on the Barbara comment, that heroin was like being cold all your life and then getting a warm blanket. And she
Mm,
said, heroin will deliver every single time. Alcohol doesn't, men don't, cigarettes, nothing else. But she said heroin delivers exactly what it promises every single time. And then she said, if you're addicted to heroin, unless you're a pop star, you're going to be dealing because there's no other way to afford it. So, all of that kind of was a new world for me. I didn't know any heroin addicts, I mean, just wasn't where I operated in the world, right? So, okay, so for the women, their stories, to be sexually abused at 5 and then dumped of the abuser at 11 for a younger girl, because they all want really young girls, then there's this callousness that seemed to develop in everybody, and need to escape, their nightmares about it all. And drugs was a really easy pathway, like it was for Barbara.
yeah. Yeah. And then there's the journey kind of past that, because there are some women that made it out of prison and
Hmm.
some that stayed out of prison. What is the difference? What did that journey look like?
Boy, I don't know. The first time Barbara was out of prison for like 20 years. And then a bunch of things went wrong in her life. And she had a really bad relationship with a guy. And she took a sledgehammer and, not him mercifully, but his car, beat up on his car. And then it was just downhill from then. It was the anger, this rage that she had, to be cycled somewhere else. So I'm sorry, I forget now. What did you ask me? No, I
Yeah.
was thinking about
Y-
her and, oh, somehow, why some people make it. So, we can't keep contact with the inmates once we're out. I still had her number and I would check to see if she came back because she left before I did. And so I would check, is she still out? Is she still, the last I knew, she was still out. So she was working with the Buddhist temple and, trying to get herself together through that. And the Bhante there and I had had several letters and communications, and he had a place for her, and I felt like she was going to a good place. So, there's so many problems because one of the things that happens in the prison system is that you get released to the place you were arrested. So women from Mexico, for instance, they are taken over the border, given $200, and then let out, and they get robbed and raped immediately once the U.S. drops them across the border. Um, Barbara had a struggle because she was afraid to go back to where she got picked up, because that's where her dealer was, that's where all of her friends were. So she was making very specific plans to join this monastery. I think people that can make it have some type of very strong support system, either family, children they're going back to, or religious, or it's family or religion is what I saw. A lot of women had children, then they wanted to get straight for them. They wanted to be able to see them, and it was motivational.
Yeah. I heard once many years ago that the opposite of addiction isn't like not doing drugs. The opposite of addiction is connection, and that kind of stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
Just
I like that.
I, yeah, and as a chaplain, I mean, connecting with people, seeing things in them that sometimes they can't see yet, and just helping
Right.
them to start to see that without just telling them,
Mm-hmm.
helping them feel seen. How does that? How do you do that? And you do that in your coaching work too. How do you help
Mm.
people feel seen and show them what's inside without telling them outright?
Do you know, one of the tenets of my faith is that God is within every person, and I really believe that. Some people have a spark of God, some people have a bonfire, but everybody has a spark of God. And my job was always to look for that spark. Where's the spark? It's there somewhere. Could be in their art, could be in the music, could be in their love for their children, pets, whatever. So I would look for that, in someone. Um, and sometimes I didn't find it. There was one woman who was really, she was the only woman that ever scared me. She was, she was connected with the drug industry and had gone way, way off the rails. And she didn't want to be connected to, and I could tell she really wanted to keep me at an arm's distance. So it has to be, it has to be two. It takes two to tango, right? So if someone is interested in connecting, and my job is to sit and wait for them kind of to come out and meet me where I am, or I don't go chasing people. I wait. I wait patiently till they come, till they're comfortable and they come out, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And while you wait, like you mentioned that there's sometimes when the connection never happens.
Hmm.
While you wait, I imagine there's some doubt. There's some questions about, am I waiting in vain? How do you
Actually, I
wait?
haven't ever had that. I haven't ever
Oh,
had that I'm waiting in vain. I haven't had that. With the woman that I didn't connect with, I was scared of her. Was she, she was the only inmate when I was with her. They wanted to do this. There was a divide in the prison between women who were born again religious people. These are all Mexican American people, born again and Catholic. So, in this woman, who was kind of the scary woman, had the control of the born again women. And she kept the other women from coming to the chapel because she said they were worshiping false images of God, whatever. So I interviewed her to talk about trying to put together a program where they would all come together. And I said, I understand there's a problem in the prison. She said, there is no problem in this prison. And the look she gave me, literally, they say that, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I thought, man, if I were on the street, she would have a gun and shoot me. I mean, I just felt that. But that was like one out of hundreds and hundreds of women, right? So I just said, oh, okay, you know,
mm,
like, let me talk to somebody else. but she had real control over them.
Mm, mm. Yeah, wow, that does sound intimidating. A- And it's also, I think, speaks to, and I would love to talk about your coaching more, but
Mhm.
speaks to, okay, there's things that are mine to do and that I can make headway with, and there's things that aren't. And that process of discernment, sometimes it's
Mhm.
just very obviously feels wrong. Like this person is scary.
Right, right.
And and sometimes it's less so. It's like this, at least for me, I kind of am like, this thing should happen. It makes absolute logical sense that it should. Therefore, I'm going to go off and do it. And then it doesn't really work out. And I wonder how you
Mm, mm,
feel your way through the decisions and the winding path that you've had through life. When to stop doing one thing and move to the next. When to stop trying. When to
mm,
keep going.
mhm. Yeah. Um, the times I have changed direction just felt so obvious. I didn't have, that doubt. Like, for instance, when after my CEO died, there was no doubt in my mind that I did not want to work for Apple or IBM. I wanted out, you know. Um, that sense that time was running out. And, so I could just die boom like that of a massive heart attack and be gone, right? So I had clarity. Each time I'd make a change, I had clarity. Um, and I'm extremely intuitive. So I have friends who would make, pros and cons list, but that just never was how my mind worked. So it would be, I would sleep, I'd wake up and say, that's it, boom, I'm going this direction.
I'm the same way, and it's kind of it's a real gift. It also just like really irritates my husband, who's like a lot more data driven. He's like,
My husband is too.
why? It's hard to explain, but I don't think it's ever led me wrong. And the reason
Right.
I don't think that is when I look back on my life and major decisions I've made, I'm like, I am so glad I have no regrets with
Yeah,
any
me
of
too.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even quote mistakes, that I made or decisions I made out of fear, like not doing something because I was afraid or because I didn't think I'd be good enough. Even those turned out okay. There's an exercise I love doing with people called a life graph, where you take your age in a line and then you put highs and lows on the graph, right? And what's fascinating for people is to see the lows are practically always followed by a high
Mm.
once you look back and graph it all out, and it is in that way that we can see our path and how we have been led. And in the middle of it, it's almost impossible to see.
Yeah. Where where are you on your life graph right now?
Yeah, I'm kind of near the end. So, you know, I'll be 79 Sunday. So it's an age, I think I was shocked. I think I'm shocked I'm this old. I don't, it inside, I mean, because your brain doesn't really age like your outside. So I have, so what do I think about where I am in my life? I'm super grateful that I have my health and work and friends, community, all of the things that I wanted to have around me, I do. Um, and looking back, I'm I'm very happy with my life. I mean, there were things I wish I would have done that I didn't do because I was afraid. I was afraid to take the risk. So, going to University of Tennessee, which my mother wanted me to do instead of going to University of Michigan. But I mean, even that, when you think, well, are you happy with where you are now? And I am. So if I would have taken another path, even that, God knows where I'd have ended up, right?
Hmm, hmm. And did you always know that you wanted to be surrounded by friends, have a community, be in like the things that you are happy that you have now? Have you been working towards them all along?
No, no, it's just I haven't been working towards it. It's just something that's kind of developed. You know, um, it's my personality I'm much more outgoing, for instance, than my husband. He's not a socially outgoing guy. So what I have is a result of the personality I was given, right? So I think the secret is to be happy with what you have. If you're, socially introverted and you want to spend more time with books and that, be happy with that.
Mm.
And partners should leave them alone. Let them be happy, right? But I've never been that organized to think, oh my God, this, that, or the other thing. The only thing was coming to Italy. That was a big, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
Mm.
And my husband really pushed me to do it. I don't think that I would have had he had any resistance, I would have said, no, let's just stay in California.
Mm. So that was less intuition and more kind of partnership. What do we
Yes,
both want?
exactly. Exactly.
Huh. Okay. So I'm conscious of time, but there's so much I want to still cover. Okay.
Yes.
Um, uh, let's talk about let's talk a little bit more about your coaching. I just have a couple of
Hmm.
questions on that. So, when someone comes to you feeling completely stuck, maybe
Hmm.
they know they need to make a change, but they can't seem to move.
Hmm.
What are you listening for? Like what tells you whether it's a timing issue, a fear issue, something else entirely? What does listening look like for you?
So when someone tells me that, in not just that, but almost everything people bring me to, I wonder what's the payoff for you in the status quo. What are you gaining by this? Who's winning inside your internal battle? There's, part of you that wants to move on, part of you that doesn't. So what are the stakes? What's the game? Who wins? Who loses? Those are the questions that I have, and it's and unknown to me. I mean, I walk into it having no clue, and as people talk, then more what happens is I formulate questions. Like I'm super curious about people, and that curiosity leads my work.
I think, yeah, I don't pause to ask myself enough about why I'm choosing to be, yeah, in this position that feels stuck. What is the payoff? That's a
Hmm.
good one. I guess my last question is what's something you wish you'd known 30 years ago? Not just intellectually, but like really
Hmm.
understood in your bones that you'd want to share with someone who's navigating their own big questions?
Me think. This is going to sound, I mean, so many answers sound so trite, but what I really believe is true is that there are no wrong steps. Wherever you're going is where you're supposed to be, and you'll make the best of it. And in retrospect, it will all look different. So, I wish I had more of a sense of that my life that seemed a little erratic all made sense in retrospect.
Mm, mm. I mean, this kind of pulls me back to the quote you gave about the soul's fear before entering the earth. Like we are in the
Hmm.
hard part now.
Yes, we are in the hard
and
part now.
and just because we can't really zoom out as much as we'd like to, and it all kind of makes sense going, yeah, when you look at it from a high enough perspective.
Right. If you can get up here, and that's why I love the life graph, right? Because you can look at that and go, oh my God, that low point, that seemed like the end of the world. You know, I was in Tennessee. My husband was working for my father. I thought, how can I possibly tell him all I want a divorce? But I'm so unhappy here. If I don't do it, it's going to be the end of me. And so now, in retrospect, I'm thinking, oh my God, why did I, anguish over that for so long? But it was part of my process, right? And so then the next high was coming to California. My whole life changed and opened up, and it was great. But it was pain, like birth. It was painful to get there.
Yeah. and this is me kind of leaning on you as my coach, but I am going to say that something this conversation is helping me with make sense of is that whatever it is that I'm doing now is what I'm
Hmm.
meant to be doing, and so it's okay. I
Hmm.
don't need to be hurrying off to the next big achievement. And
Right,
my task every day is to be open to, I think, the like really big and exciting things that God, the universe has in store for me, big and exciting for my life. It doesn't have to
hmm,
feel big and exciting for anybody else. And
right,
so, what does that look like to know that if I choose, I can do everything I'm destined to do, and that will feel perfect, you
right.
know?
If you choose, you will have no choice but to do everything you're destined to do. So all of the worry that we put out is for things that, all the worries, 99% of the worries that I've had in life have never happened, right? So trying to get the perfect thing is just not necessary. It will all be perfect in retrospect. So you just have to have faith to take one more step. And I've also really learned the path looks different. I take one more step. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't see these things along the path before.
Mm,
For people who are achievement oriented, it's very hard to let go of that sense of reward through achievements. But eventually you've got to, because you are more than your achievements.
that is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Susan. I
Oh,
really love
Noelle,
talking
thank
with
you. It
you.
was fun.
Yay. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm also always looking for guests who enjoy meaningful conversations. If that sounds like you, please send me a message and let me know what you'd like to talk about. I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening.